for many years. It's just a lot of those things we've been working on, such as the citywide design guidelines. Some of the community plans we've been working on are finally getting to a point where they're getting closer to adoption. So as much as I like to take credit for all the things that we're going through right now, many of them started before me through work I did with Gail Goldberg, who many of you know. I just saw Gail last Friday, and she's doing really well, and said to say hello. She's enjoying her retirement and still participating with ULI and doing some different things in the community. So as we're moving through the process in the planning department, one thing that's come up to me that really was alarming one of the first weeks I was on the job was I heard from many of you and many other leaders from your plum committees and the neighborhood councils talking about your legislative process and how even when we have an ordinance that many of you may get behind or appreciate, like having design standards for buildings that come in to the city, that right now you can build a box, have a few windows for life safety, and you're pretty much done. But having requirements that make articulation, make you have a pitched roof, make the building be set back a certain way, and have different types of architectural details included as a matter of form and urban design, and having that be a requirement and guidelines that the city staff can utilize to require applicants to consider those items. I've noticed that we had a lot of controversy on those, which was kind of shocking to me because I expect a lot of hugs and high fives, and we upset a lot of people. And what I found out working with many community leaders was what was upsetting was the time period that they had to review those. Our staff released the CEQA document, which is the environmental approval for it, before the staff report was out. So they had a CEQA document they couldn't really read looking at the staff report, so it was really confusing. So what we did was we took a step back and allowed for the process to slow down, and so those two documents could sync up, and did a number of workshops to get people understanding what we're actually doing, and went out to many groups and talked to many of you about these guidelines. But what it taught me was that, someone brought up earlier, the legislative process at the minimum for a neighborhood council to either support, oppose, or make comments on an ordinance or even a project takes about 60 days at the minimum. We found in the planning department we've been working on an ordinance usually for about a year, sometimes 6 months, sometimes 2 years. And as it goes through the neighborhood council process, once we have a council file and we're starting to agendize this for our planning commission, the neighborhood councils are notified through the early notification system or through groups like this organization here, where we see many neighborhood councils at one time. And then they start bringing it before their board. Before you go to your plum committee makes a recommendation to your board. Your full board takes an action. Sometimes they may have to hear it twice, and that 60 days isn't allowed to run out. Now you're forced to go to planning commission, speaking as an individual. All of your board hasn't been briefed on it. They're looking to the plum committee for advice, and they don't have that advice. So we're currently working on a policy in the planning department that would allow for that 60-day time period to run, and wouldn't bring any ordinances forward that are citywide ordinances through our own legislative process until we've had that 60-day period run. And to also make that better, to give you early notice when these are coming. So when we have our first draft go out, make sure that that CEQA document's available, the draft's available, so you have time to bring it through your board, through your plum committee, and back to your neighborhood council. So I'll look forward to letting my written policy that my staff's drafting right now that all of our planners in the department are going to follow, and hopefully that's a model for the rest of the city, maybe even the city council, when they have legislative updates come up. Thank you. What we don't want is to confuse people, alarm people, and get rid of that transparency we've been working so hard to provide. One of the big things I promised the mayor was that I want a transparent process. At the end of the day, many times we agree with most neighborhood councils, and sometimes we may disagree, but that can be happening in an open, in a collegial manner, where we can discuss the issues and put them all on the table, and then the eventual decision makers, which in most cases are the city council, will be able to hear those discussions and make an informed decision. So we have no intent in rushing things through the process. What we really want to do is get your buy-in, get your understanding of them, and get your ideas and advice. So we don't have all the answers. We need a lot of people in this room to help us with those answers. So as you see things we're working on, you say, you know what, we think this may go in a different direction here. We're concerned about this. This part's great, but we'd like to see a little different language. That's why my staff comes to these meetings, and many of the advice you've given us has been incorporated into our policies and programs that we're doing in the ordinances. So it's really important for us to get that process with you going. So again, I'll forward that to Len, and we'll have that out in the next couple of weeks. But we're already following that type of model as we're doing the new legislative updates. The times where we can't do that so much on the project end, many of you The economy's changed, so we don't see quite as many projects we had in the past, but many of you I've seen in our public hearings when we're a decision maker on a project that an applicant proposes. And so when those projects come in, neighborhood councils, through the early notification system, have the ability to get a case file, get a copy of the materials, send it to their board, and get information. The difficulty with that is we're under state mandated timelines to process those cases. Because of the staff shortages in the department, we're operating under a severe backlog. So many times those cases don't go through the process in the 75 days that's required by our local codes, and in some cases state law. So in many of those cases, you have the opportunity right now to engage and get them through your board in that 60-day time period. So we're looking at other solutions as we look at our code to say, okay, how can we make sure neighborhood councils are notified early when the application is filed, hear from the applicant if they want a presentation, and have time to have an informed discussion about that and bring it before the decision maker. We've also had requests from homeowners groups to have that same kind of courtesy of early notification, and so far the department's stance has been no. They can join the neighborhood council and get that, but there's a reason why the city charter created neighborhood councils. We want to make sure that the official communications for the city come through the neighborhood councils, so that there's a benefit for people coming to your meetings and joining rather than they're just their local HOA. And that's been a little controversial in some parts of the city, but I think it's a good policy for us to follow, just because those of you who engage, the city's recognized the certified neighborhood councils. It gives them an incentive to join with you on getting that early information, and many of you share it with multiple neighborhood groups, which we do appreciate. We're working on our community plan program updates. Those have been stalled severely. We have, we're utilizing environmental impact reports for the majority of them due to the size of our communities that we're updating. We've had some contract issues with those. The environmental consulting firm we're working with on 6 of those EIRs went bankrupt. So, like many private businesses, we found that challenging, and we basically were lucky enough to get a pretty good work product out of them, and they work with us in collaboration to not burn their relationship with us, so that we're able to transfer some of the remaining funding to a new contract. But that's taken about 6 months to kind of unravel that. Working with Chris Joseph and Associates, who's the firm that went defunct. And so that took our community plan program a little bit offline for a while. The good news is our first community plan update, the Hollywood community plan, is available online. The draft environmental impact report should be out within the next month, and then we'll be going through a series of public workshops to have that reviewed and have that discussed with many neighborhood groups. So Len, we'd be happy to come back here and have the staff do a full presentation if any of you are interested in the Hollywood community plan. And even if you don't live in Hollywood, it's kind of a nice plan to see, because it's really the future of how our community plans will look. A lot deeper. They talk about infrastructure needs for the community. They also relate to what is going on outside just the planning issues and land use issues, where the new facilities plan to go, how do we accommodate those, where's the transit going, what are the traffic needs of the area, what's the vision for that community, and how do we bolster that, what are the areas that need to have preservation and protections and have mitigation around them. We're also looking at, through that endeavor, some future activities which I think would be really vital to many community groups, which is trying to find ways to create nexus studies which link basically infrastructure with development. So that if we say someone's going to come in and build a condominium project, what is their impact on parks? We currently have an ordinance, the Quimby Fee ordinance, that has a small fee go for new infrastructure for parks. The problem is it doesn't go far enough. So when we look at if people, and we were talking about Measure R and the rail lines and how we're going to accommodate those, as we start to see the next wave of building come in Los Angeles, how do we make sure that the infrastructure needs are paid for by that private development? Right now, we go through a series of exercises to do that, but at the end of the day, the money that is being brought in isn't really being funneled to the right places. We're skimming the top, but we're not really going deep enough. So really tying the infrastructure with any development that's going to happen in the city, whether it's the city development or private development, what have you, making sure the sewers, the transit system, parking, all those things are addressed, open space. Currently, our Quimby program doesn't quite get us there, and so we're looking at having a nexus study as part of the Hollywood community plan that we adopted after the plan that would look at basically what are your infrastructure needs and how do we make sure that it's funded through any activity that happens in Hollywood